Okay, so in this example, we're going to be talking about simplifying rational expressions, and in particular, when we multiply and divide. Now, luckily, when you're simplifying down rational expressions and you're dealing with multiplication and division, it's much easier than addition and subtraction, because with addition and subtraction, you have to get a common denominator, and it can be a bit tricky sometimes. But these problems are definitely a lot more straightforward. All you have to remember is to factor everything. So for example, I'm going to go right through this problem and I'm going to factor every single thing that I can. And I'm going to start on my numerator right here. I'm going to see if I can factor. Then I'll go to my denominator right here. Then I'll go to my numerator right here. And then I'll go to my denominator right here before I even try to do anything in the problem. All right. So you always want to try to factor everything when you're multiplying or dividing rational expressions. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Looking at my first numerator, I can factor out a 3. I can also factor out an x. So doing that, I'm going to factor out a 3 and an x, and that will leave me with 3x plus 2. Okay, there it is. Now I go on my denominator. I can pull out a 10. I can also pull out an x. So I'm going to pull out a 10x, and then in parentheses, I'll have 3x plus 2. Okay. And so you can see here that I already have a common factor. What's going to end up happening, these will cancel out. All right. But before we do that, let's go ahead and see if we can do anything else here. Going to the right hand side, I have a 10x over 4. I can't do anything there. So I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite it. 10x all over 4. Now see if anything will cancel out, because it's going to make the problem much easier. I have a 3x plus 2 on both the top and the bottom. These factors here will cancel out. And remember, since you're multiplying, right, I can essentially cross-reduce here. So I have a 10x and a 10x that are diagonal from each other. These are going to end up canceling out as well. So I'm going to cancel out the 10x and the 10x. Now I'm left with 3x over 4. So 3x all over 4, and that's it. There's nothing else here I can simplify down. This is your final answer, okay? So you can see it's pretty straightforward. Just remember, before you do the problem, make sure you try to factor everything. All right, let's try a few more problems. So here's our next problem. Now this one is division. Now the only difference between multiplication and division, when you have division, you have to remember keep, change, flip. This problem is going to turn into a multiplication problem. Okay, but first I have to keep my first fraction. I have to change this to multiplication, and then I'm going to flip this second fraction. Okay, before I do any of that though, I'm going to see if I can factor anything. Okay, so starting on the left-hand side, I have 1 over 10k. I can't do anything there. So I'm going to write 1 over 10k. And you can actually do this all in one go if you really wanted to. I know that I have to change this to multiplication, so that's what I'm going to do. And I have to flip this. So again, we're going to flip it, and we're also going to try to factor. So looking at that denominator, I can go ahead and factor that as k plus 6 and k minus 6. That's a difference of 2 squares, right? So I can write that as k plus 6 and then k minus 6. Okay, and again, we're flipping it. That's why it's going on the numerator now, right? All over 6 minus k. So be careful here. It looks like you have a common factor, but you don't. Okay, this right here and this right here are not a common factor, because I have a positive k up here and a negative k down here. I have a negative 6 up here and then a positive 6 down here. But there's a way you can get around that. So we're going to go ahead and factor out a negative 1 from this factor right here. And when we do that, we get 1 over 10k times, and here we get k plus 6. Factoring out that negative 1, we just put negative 1 here. And then we'll have negative k plus 6, okay? So I'm left with negative k plus 6. And then on my denominator, I have 6 minus k, okay? So you can see I have a common factor here. I have negative k plus 6, and on my denominator, I have 6 minus k. That is the same thing, right? So that will cancel, and I'm left with k plus 6 times a negative 1. That just means all your signs inside here are going to change. So your final answer is going to be negative k, right, minus 6 all over 10k. All right, and that's it. That's your final answer right there, okay? Let's try 2 more problems. So here's our next example. We're dealing with multiplication, so we do not have to keep, change, flip. And actually, right off the bat, I can go ahead and cancel out n minus 1 and n minus 1. Remember, it's multiplication, and I'm going diagonal there, meaning I have the same common factor going diagonal. They will cancel out. So this will cancel, this will cancel. All I really have to do is factor this part, and see if anything else will cancel. So looking at 10n plus 90, I can factor out a 10. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to factor out a 10, and then I'll be left with n plus 9. Okay, there it is. On my denominator, you're going to want to use the AC method. I have videos on how to do that, but we're going to do the AC method in our head. And so again, if you don't know how to use the AC method for factoring, check out that video. I'll go ahead and link it below. But just doing it right here in our head, I need two numbers when I multiply that will give me negative 36, but add up to a positive 5. Well, that's going to be 9 and negative 4. So putting that in factored form, I get n plus 9 and n minus 4. Okay, there it is. We just factored it. And now we look for a common factor. I have one right here, n plus 9 and n plus 9. That cancels. I'm left with 10 all over n minus 4, and that's done. Okay, so on this problem here, again, you had to factor the quadratic using the AC method. So again, make sure you are proficient with doing that. All right, let's try one more problem. Okay, here's our last problem, and you can see that it's division. So again, we want to try to factor everything first, and then we'll keep, change, flip, and honestly, we can do it all in one go. So looking right here, I have 3x minus 9. I can factor out a 3. That's what I'm going to do. I'm left with x minus 3 now. On my denominator, I can't do anything there. I'm just going to write x plus 4. Okay, now I'm going to do it all in one go. I'm going to change this to multiplication. And I'm going to flip this fraction here while also factoring it, okay? So first, let's work on the denominator. Since this part right here is technically going to go on my numerator, we can factor that. Again, do the AC method. You can do it in your head. I need two numbers when I multiply. That will give me negative 2, but add up to a negative 1. So those two numbers are going to be negative 2 and positive 1. So I'm going to write here x minus 2 and then x plus 1. Okay, that's factored. And again, we're flipping it. That's why it's going on the numerator. Now, working on this part here, we're going to factor it, and this will go on our denominator, right? So I need two numbers when I multiply. That will give me negative 3, but add up to negative 2. So that's going to be negative 3 and positive 1. So I'm going to write here x minus 3 and x plus 1. Okay, that's factored. Now see if anything will cancel out. Well, look, I have x plus 1 and x plus 1. That will cancel. Going diagonal right here, right? I have that x minus 3 and x minus 3. That will cancel. And is there anything else? Well, it doesn't look like there is. So now we just multiply right across. I'm going to do 3 times x minus 2. That gives me 3 times x minus 2. I can leave it just like that. That's fine. All over x plus 4. Done. That's completely factored. And so that is how you simplify down rational expressions when you're dealing with multiplication or division. It's pretty straightforward. Just make sure that you factor the whole thing first and then see if anything will cancel out. Now, if you're dealing with division, make sure you flip that second fraction while changing the sign to multiplication. If you can remember those things, you should be able to do these problems with ease, okay? So if the video helped you in any way, if you could just go ahead and give it a thumbs up, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, make sure you subscribe to this channel. That way you get more math videos in the future, and I'll see you in the next one.